Hello, everybody. Welcome into Sports by GSMC Podcast Network. I am your host, Jeremy Lapidus. Same show, new time. Today, we have a great show for you. It is Monday, which means we have to go over everything that happened in a wild weekend, a rivalry weekend, winners and losers from college football. Of course, we came out with a brand new top 25. We'll take a look at my playoff bracket, what I have, who is the first few out, who just makes the cut, as we have a very interesting bubble to discuss heading into college football championship weekend. Outside of that, also much to talk about in the NFL. The Bears, since we last talked, have fired their head coach, Matt Eberflus. We will talk about what that means for him, for the Bears, and for the future of that organization, as well as a little bit on Monday Night Football. But before we get into any of that, remember, if you would like to be an even bigger part of the show than you already are, all you need to do is go to gsmcpodcast.net. Or if you are on YouTube, you can use that super chat feature. If you do either of those two things, a message should pop up on the bottom of the screen for you, me, and everybody else around the world to see. If you do have a burning question about sports, anything at all that you would like to ask, go ahead and throw that in the comments. Throw it in the chat. I will get to it as soon as I possibly can. I appreciate everybody so much for sticking around, talking some sports with me here on a beautiful Monday, December 2nd. But like I was saying, we're going to start off our show here, as we always do on Monday, with our college football top 25. And like we do as well, before we get into the top 25, we're going to do a little bit of special highlight on the group of 5 top 5. So like I said, starting off, the top 5 group of 5 teams. This one has maybe the most movement that we've seen just about any week. We still have the same team at the top in Boise State. They've been at the top ever since we've started doing this. There was some very interesting conversations over the last couple of weeks, but movement outside of number 1 for all 4 positions. At number 5, Army slides down to there. We had a team jump over them after a performance this weekend. Army continues and will continue to be a very talented team. They are going to make the American Conference Championship game. That's just not going to mean as much after Tulane at number 4 lost to Memphis, the number 3 team. Memphis was a team that the first time we did our group of 5 top 5 ranking cracked, I believe, at number 3. This is a team that has been trending as one of the best group of 5 schools for a pretty long time. They get a huge win over a Tulane team that I thought if they had won out, there was a real shot at them taking away a bid from the Big 12. Obviously, none of that has any matter anymore. At this point, it's going to be between Boise State and UNLV at the top for that group of 5 spot for the Mountain West. Whoever wins that championship game will get in. So that's our group of 5 top 5. But college football top 25, starting at number 25, it is those Memphis Tigers. They get a huge win. Their biggest win of the season. They were, again, like I said, near the top of that group of 5 ladder for a while at the beginning of the season. They had taken out some really good teams, some quality opponents, a couple of weird losses in the middle of the season, but now they're back in the top 25 for me. A huge win over a team that last week I had ranked in the top 15 in Tulane. It's a massive win on the road, not to mention. This is huge for them. They're the number 25 team this week. 24 goes to Illinois, a team that honestly I've probably been disrespecting a little bit. When we start to talk about bubble teams or the college football playoff, it's going to consist of mostly SEC teams. But when you take a step back, Illinois has built itself quite a solid resume. They've got 3 losses, same as those bubble teams from the SEC. They're down here at 24 for me. They don't have a shot, but they have played a really tough schedule, and I think they deserve a little bit more love than some people are giving them. 23 goes to Baylor. Baylor and really the whole Big 12 have really shown that they are one of the better conferences in all of college football. I know I was talking about how maybe the American was going to take their spot, but you take a look at this list and the teams from about 13 to 24, it's mostly consistent of Big 12 teams. These are teams that are very much great teams in college football. They just aren't quite the elite level teams. They're just all really good, and it does not help that they are beating up on each other. Baylor at 23, a huge win this last week. Texas A&M at 22, and I understand maybe Texas A&M with that loss to Texas should have fallen out, but their defense played incredible. They only gave up 17 points against a Texas team that has been one of the better offensive teams in all of the sport this year, right? Obviously, they didn't score a point on offense. That is a bad thing. But only losing by 10 in that situation shows me a lot. This is a team that is eliminated from the playoffs. Don't get me wrong. They don't have a chance. But they're still a very good Texas A&M team, and there was a lot to build off of in a 4-loss campaign this year. 21, it's UNLV, a team that still very much has a shot. They just need to win, and they are in the Mountain West Championship game when they take on Boise State. That is going to be an awesome game. We saw what happened last time. UNLV came up just short, but this is a UNLV team that, in all honesty, is playing a little bit better than Boise State is right now. UNLV, I think, is an extremely talented team and has, in their own right, a real deserving chance to make the college football playoff, regardless of what happens at Boise State. Now, obviously, only one of them is going to get in, but I think it's not going to be they got in because they beat Boise State. They have a very impressive resume outside of that as well. At number 20, we have BYU. They had a tough luck kind of stretch in near the end of that season, but they bounced back at a big win at the end against Houston. This is not the way that they thought this season would end. They're on the outside looking in. They're not going to find a place in the playoffs, but a successful season for BYU in the Big 12. This is about as much as you could ask for out of them. 10 wins. It's a good season. At 19, it's Clemson. And Clemson is a team that I've been very up and down on. Clemson, at the beginning of the season, after they lost to Georgia, I was all the way out. They started winning teams. They started beating teams, winning consistently. I pushed them all the way up to 6. Then they played their first real opponent, and they got absolutely destroyed. I dropped them out of the top 25. They're finding their way back up slowly. They lose to South Carolina, and I still disagree with the fact that they were ranked 12th last week. I think that was way too high for them, but a loss, and now they're in the ACC championship game. Now win, and they are in, and they are the chaos scenario right now. If they find a way to beat SMU in the ACC championship, that is when chaos ensues. And right now, for how chaotic the college football playoff season has been, it feels like it's kind of settling down. This is the big chaos scenario right here. If Clemson finds a way in. I don't think they do. I don't think they really deserve it. They're probably the least deserving team with the easiest path in. Clemson at 19. At 18, it's Syracuse. I've been telling you about Syracuse all year long. This is a really good team. Fran Brown has done an incredible job in his first year at that program, bringing in high-quality transfers, keeping around the guys that were going to contribute, and it really paid off, beating the number 6 team in the nation on Saturday. This was a game that, as we broke down, was going to be fireworks. I kept saying first team to 40 wins, and that's how it goes, right? Syracuse wins a shootout. Neither of these teams play defense. Both Syracuse and Miami, I think, are two sides of the same coin. I think Miami, still a more talented team. They're not losing the game. That offense is more high-powered. Their defenses are on the same level. Or I should say that offense is more consistent. These two teams, very similar. You saw it play out in Syracuse this weekend. They get a big win, one of the biggest in their program history. Huge win for Syracuse. They're into the top 20. Number 17, it's Colorado. You have Heisman candidate Travis Hunter on your squad. You are going to get into the top 20. Teams, they go out there and they dominate. I know they took a tough loss to a Kansas team just 2 weeks ago now, but still, this is a really good Buffaloes team. They're not going to get any chance of making the playoffs. Again, this field really has drastically narrowed down to about 13, 14, potentially 15 teams that could get in that top 12. But the Buffaloes just on the outside of that. I still love the talent. They're going to have to rebuild a lot this year. They're losing a lot of really, really talented players. We'll see how that goes, but I still think they deserve to be at least in the top 20. At 16, we have Ole Miss. This is where we kind of get the start of real playoff contention. So 16 teams here. 4 of these are going to miss, and this is the edge of the bubble. Ole Miss and Lane Kiffin have put out their arguments to make the college football playoff. I don't have them in. They've taken too many bad losses right now, and I just don't believe in this team whose biggest win is in overtime against LSU, right? This is not a team that I really trust that much heading into the college football playoff. They just haven't been as consistent as I want them to be. They play like some of the best. Sometimes they play like the best team on the planet. Other times they just can't beat a bad SEC school. It's hard to tell with this team. Ole Miss at 16. At 15, we have Iowa State. Iowa State, again, they play in their conference championship game for the Big 12. They're not going to be favorites, or at least I don't think they will be favorites. They're a team that has played great football. They got that couple of tough losses against Kansas when Kansas went and ruined a bunch of really good seasons in the Big 12 just in their last 4 games of the football season. But Iowa State, still a very quality team. They do have a shot to make it in. They don't really have an at-large shot, but I do think they would deserve it if they won that Big 12 conference. 14 is Miami, and they fall 8 spots this week after losing to Syracuse. We all knew what the problem was. It's not like we turned on this game and were surprised by this Miami team, right? You turn on the film, you say, oh, this offense is amazing. Cam Ward can be Superman, but that defense is awful. And that's exactly what played out, right? They could not stop a nosebleed in that second half. They did not stop them a single time in that second half. Outside of a forced fumble that was caused, there was not a single stop by that defense. I really did not like the decision to kick a field goal with the way that defense had been playing. I would have gone for it all, 4th down and goal from the 10. They obviously did not decide to do that. And hindsight is 2020. You can say what you want. I can say, oh, I'm right about all this, and you can, decide what you would have done there. But I think that was a mistake by Mario Cristobal, and I think that's one that's going to haunt them and make them miss the college football playoff this year. At 13, it's Alabama. Alabama is right there on the bubble. They are the first team out for me. Alabama is a good team, right? They are. They beat Auburn, but you can tell when it's a good Alabama day and it's a bad Alabama day. What I want in my playoffs is consistency. So Alabama is that first team out in a chaos scenario, they'll get in. But if everything ends as it's expected to, Clemson loses in the ACC title game, Arizona State wins in the ACC title game, and everything just kind of plays out the way that it's projected to, I see Alabama just on the outside looking in. I know the AP has it the other way, but the way that it is, I cannot put Alabama in the playoff. When they get the legs of Jalen Milroe going, they are incredible. We saw it. Another 3 touchdowns on the ground for him against Auburn. He obviously did what he did against LSU a couple weeks ago, but we also see performances like against Oklahoma. They couldn't get anything going through the air because he wasn't effective on the ground. And when he's not effective on the ground, that entire offense grinds to a halt. That's not necessarily a bad thing. When you have a great quarterback like that and he's not having his day, you're generally not going to have your day. But the issue is it's happened 3 times now. And it's happened in 3 very inopportune times. It's just not something I can really accept in the college football playoff right now, especially ahead of a team like South Carolina. 12 is the Boise State Broncos. They're the best group of 5 school. They get another big win this weekend. They just need to win, and they're in. They've won 10 straight games. Ashton Jeanty in the Heisman conversation. I know that it's all Travis Hunter right now, but I think there's a real conversation for Ashton Jeanty to get in there. We'll see what he does in the Big 12 in the Mountain West Championship game. At 11 is those South Carolina Gamecocks, and this is where the bubble ends, right? At number 11 for me. South Carolina is the best team that is currently with 3 losses in the entire nation. And for me, it's not really even that close. What Lenore Sellers has been able to do with that team in late game situations, even against Alabama. Honestly, South Carolina should have won that game against Alabama. There was a bad decision made. They got that onside kick. They missed the field goal to win the game. They end up losing by 2. They have not lost to anybody bad. Alabama, Ole Miss have both lost to bad teams. And you can say, oh, Alabama and Ole Miss have both beat this team. But who's playing the best football right now? You can't look at me with a straight face and say Alabama or Ole Miss are playing better football than South Carolina right now, and that South Carolina strength of schedule is just better than theirs. It just simply is. This is a South Carolina team that I have a lot of issues with if they don't make the college football playoff. This is a great South Carolina squad, and I don't see the argument for why they shouldn't get in, if I'm being completely honest with you. Getting into the top 10, though, we have those Sun Devils of Arizona State, a massive win over an Arizona team that's been struggling. I don't think they have a win in Big 12 play, but Arizona State does its job. It clinches a spot in the Big 12 title game. They are the best team in the Big 12 right now. And the Big 12, like I said, is a very talented conference. I believe they actually have the most teams in my top 25 right now, or at least it's very close with them. This is a very, very good conference. Arizona State is the best of them, and it's a great story. I hope they find a way in. They're going to have to win because there's not going to be any extra spots for the Big 12. At number 9, it's the Tennessee Volunteers. That defense is awesome. Nico Iomvaleda continues to play great football. He's been getting better and better as time continues down the stretch this season. A big comeback win for him and the Volunteers against Vanderbilt, who had a very solid season this year. Excuse me. Tennessee, while they're not in the SEC playoffs, in the SEC title game, I think they're one of those teams that has clinched the spot. They're the furthest down on the totem pole that I think has clinched the spot for me. Tennessee is a lock to make the playoffs, disregarding any kind of extra chaos that makes the world fall upside down and some crazy stuff happen. And number 8, another team I think should be locked in. Not 100% is, but SMU. They are the best team in the ACC. They have the best combination of offense and defense. They should destroy Clemson, honestly. Clemson just has not shown they've been able to play with the big boys, and outside of a loss in week 1 against BYU, SMU has been perfect all season long. SMU is a great college football team. They are going to make the college football playoffs. I hope they will, even with a loss. I don't think they will, but maybe they do. SMU at 8. At 7, it's Indiana, another team that is locked in there. They finished their season with a 66-0 rout of Purdue. Huge game for them. They finish at 11-1, the best record in the history of their program. They have Coach of the Year, Curt Cignetti. This is a team that, as we saw against Ohio State, will be bullied up front if they go up against a team that has that strength in the trenches. But if you don't beat them like that, they are going to be very dangerous. That defense and that offense are very, very potent if you let them not get bullied in the trenches. At number 6 is Ohio State, a brutal loss, maybe the worst loss of the entire season, in the entire nation all year long to Michigan. They looked out of sorts. They looked out of sync. Nothing was going their way. They could not get anything going the entire day, and they lose to their rivals for the 4th straight season. The last time that happened, 1988 to 1991. 4 straight years. It has not happened in over 30 years. They have been dominating this rivalry. This was a Michigan team that really should not have made a bowl game. If they had not won this game, they wouldn't have made a bowl. They shouldn't have won this game. They came out there and they played their brand of football. They ran the ball down the other team's throat, and they didn't even do it that effectively, if I'm being honest. That was a great performance from the Ohio State defense, limiting them to 13 points. There were 2 missed field goals. That's not the big story, though. Ryan Day loses yet another game, and Ohio State falls all the way out to 6. I don't know if they're hosting a game. They're not going to be in the Big Ten conference title game. I think they're still a lock, though. I think they still did enough to get in. Into the top 5, it's Georgia. They struggled against a quality Georgia Tech team. Haynes King did his thing. He's been doing it all season long. Georgia pulls it out in 8 overtimes. What a way to kick off rivalry weekend, am I right? But Georgia prevails. They get a big win at home. You can talk about the refs. You can talk about the OT rules. Doesn't matter. It was all on the field. They had the same chances. Georgia found a way to win. And like I say, good teams find a way to win regardless of the circumstances. Georgia at number 5. At number 4, Penn State. They found their way into the Big Ten championship game. They will take on Oregon. I'm excited to see what happens. It seems like sometimes rivals can get in your head. We saw that with Ohio State and Michigan. Maybe, even though Oregon is a team that took down Ohio State and Ohio State beat Penn State, maybe that's just, a mental block there. I'm curious to see how Penn State stacks up against Oregon, but both of them should be in regardless. And number 3, it's Notre Dame. And I understand they lost to NIU. Yes, they have a weak strength of schedule, but this is a Notre Dame team that showed me a lot against a USC team that is pretty quality, right? This is a USC team that has beaten some quality teams this season. They're not perfect, don't get me wrong, but that defense of Notre Dame really showed me a lot. 2 long pick sixes for them. This is a Notre Dame team that's playing better than just about any team in the nation right now, and they deserve to be in the playoff. They deserve to be in the top 5, and I will die on that hill. At number 2, it's Texas. Again, they just keep winning games. It's not always the prettiest. The offense doesn't always look the best, but Quinn Ewers went out there toughed out an injury. They have Arch Manning back there who's come in and been competent in football games if they need him to be. They obviously have that blemish on their resume with that loss to Georgia. That's a tough one. Georgia hasn't been playing its best football, and even in that game, they didn't play their best football. But Texas Longhorns, their defense has been really, really impressive. The way that they're just able to keep their team in the game, even when the offense isn't doing what it needs to do. Texas is at number 2. And at number 1, it's the Oregon Ducks, the one and only undefeated team in the entire nation. A team that is dispatched of Ohio State, a team that has taken care of multiple teams that will be, or at least at this moment are, in the current playoff picture. This is an Oregon team that has just continued to get better. They've had their issues. That's fine. But they show up when they need to show up. And Oregon, I think, unquestionably, is the best team in college football. You may ask, where does this put us in the college football playoff picture? Well, good news for you. We have a bracket. Right now, based on my rankings, this is the college football playoff bracket. You will see the 4 teams getting byes are from the 4 power conferences: Oregon, Texas, Arizona State, SMU. Those are the 4 teams getting byes. As for the at-large bids, as for that 5th conference championship, it's going to be Boise State. At least that's what I'm projecting. They get that 12 spot. As far as the at-large bids go, you have Notre Dame at that top at-large bid, a rematch between Indiana and Ohio State, still in the shoe there. See if Indiana fares any better. Texas takes on Georgia, another rematch, and then South Carolina is my team that I think should absolutely get in. They take on Penn State if the bracket stays the exact same way. But let me know what you think. First team out is Alabama. Second team out is Miami. Love to hear your thoughts on this. We're going to take a quick break here. When we come back, we turn our attention to what actually happened on the field this last weekend. Winners, losers from a wild rivalry week. Tempers flared, flags were planted. We'll talk about all of that and more coming up next here on Sports by GSMC Podcast Network. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Everybody in the world blind. Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I wanna be the greatest. Everybody on the fake shit. I look around and feel like everybody is the fakest. I make this every day and I'm impatient, hoping one day I blow up from the basement. Statement, the top is so vacant. I don't hear shit that I think is amazing. Waiting for my day when I'm playing sold out shows for 1,000 faces. Hey, give me that crown, get in my way and to be put down. It ain't replaced all this my sound. If I want that shit, then I'll get it right now. I'm losing it, the news it fits. I'm losing shit, a stupid myth. You choose to live or choose to dip. You choose to fight or lose your grip and lose a gift. Oh, I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Welcome back to Sports by GSMC Podcast Network. I am your host, Jeremy Lapidus. Today is Monday, December 2nd. If you are just tuning in, we just finished going over the top 25 as we approach conference championship week. In this segment, we turn our attention to winners and losers from a wild rivalry week. The final week in college football always gives us a show. We've got winners coming up in just a second, but before we do, remember, if you would like to be an even bigger part of the show than you already are, all you need to do is go to gsmcpodcast.net. Or if you are on YouTube, you can use that super chat feature. If you do either of those two things, a message should pop up on the bottom of the screen for you, me, and everybody else around the world to see. If you do have a burning question about sports, anything at all that you would like to ask, go ahead and throw that in the comments. Throw it in the chat. I will get to it as soon as I possibly can. I appreciate everybody so much for sticking around, talking some sports with me here on a beautiful Monday, December 2nd. But like I was saying, in this segment, we are going to hit the winners and losers, starting off, as always, with the winners. We have 5 winners, 5 losers, and I will say there were a lot more than 5 things, 5 teams, 5 people, 5 themes that I thought could be winners this week. I narrowed it down to my top 5, though, so we're going to kick it off right now at number 5 with Notre Dame. I talked a lot about Notre Dame in our top 25 just a segment ago, but to continue it, Notre Dame clinched themselves a college football playoff spot. They are one of a few teams that absolutely 100% are a lock for the college football playoff now. There is not a single thing that they can do to miss the college football playoff with where they are ranked, with how the way the rest of the schedule is going. They have locked themselves in. Congratulations to Notre Dame on the 5 seed, in my opinion. Maybe they get to 6, but they will be hosting a game in South Bend for the first ever 12-team college football playoff. They dispatched of the best team that was on their schedule. And you can talk about how it was a weak schedule. You can talk about how they lost to NIU, I understand. But what they've done since that loss has been really, really impressive to me. They go out there and they beat both service academies while they were undefeated. They take out Navy, they take out Army, they dispatch both of them. Both of those teams were ranked in the top 25 at the time. So you can talk about strength of schedule, but they have now taken care of 2 top 25 teams. That's a solid resume. They also took out USC. I understand USC was kind of a middling team in the Big Ten, but that is a rivalry game. That adds some extra pressure right there. That was on the road. Adds some extra pressure right there. And that was a game that, for USC at least, kind of was their Super Bowl. With the way that the season has gone, they got absolutely destroyed in that one. They have stepped up every single time there has been some big question asked of them, and outside of that one blemish on their schedule, they have answered it. Notre Dame is the number 5 winner of the week. At number 4, it's Penn State. They go out there, and they look like they were in trouble a little bit in the beginning against Penn State. No question about it. They go down 7-0, still down 7-3, and then the offense explodes against Maryland. They do their thing, and not only do they do their thing, but they have clinched a spot in the Big Ten championship game. They have the right to potentially get the number 1 overall seed if they beat Oregon. There is a real argument for Penn State to be the number 1 team in the nation. They get their shot at it. They get their shot at a first-round bye at a minimum, and that is huge for a program that under James Franklin has been known as the team that is perpetually 3rd place, perpetually behind Ohio State, behind Michigan, behind the true juggernauts in the Big Ten. They get their chance to plant the flag. They have their chance to win a Big Ten championship for the first time in a very long time after Ohio State slips up against Michigan for the 4th straight season. A massive win for Penn State. They are the 4th winner of the week. At number 3, our number 3 winner this week, after being the biggest loser last week, they're back here. It's the SEC. How about the SEC? I stood here last week and loudly proclaimed they lost a spot in the college football playoff. Now I'm here to say, nuh-uh. I take that back. After the losses from Ohio State and a loss from Miami especially, that's the big one here, I believe the SEC has gotten back that extra spot that the ACC had basically taken from them. Miami had that spot locked up all season, but they were teetering on the edge. They drop a bad one to Syracuse. That opens up the door for most likely Alabama. I think it should be South Carolina. You can make an argument for Ole Miss. It's probably going to be Alabama, though. But the SEC gets a spot, a win, after seeming like they had lost themselves, a spot behind the Big Ten. They would have only had 3. The Big Ten would have had 4. That's a big win for the SEC, and they're the number 3 winners this week. Getting to number 2, the second biggest winner of the week is Clemson. How about a lucky break for them? They go out there, and not only do they not get their end of the bargain done, they lose to their rival. That's 2 ticks in the wrong, but they get the biggest check. Miami loses a game. Their second conference loss, while this is just the first conference loss for Clemson. Clemson, a team that has been weak, to say the least. They have. They've just not been that good. They have not performed well against good teams, and we see that week in and week out. Their losses to 2 SEC teams and to 1 ACC school. Louisville, one of those very underrated schools. They get a big win. I still think they're a very good team, right? They take a loss there. Then they lose to both Georgia. They get destroyed by in South Carolina with his heroics at the end this week in a rivalry game. That's 3 losses to really the 3 big games, only 3 big games that they've played. We can talk about Pitt. I guess that's a big win for them. Pitt was really falling apart at the end. Virginia Tech, maybe that's their biggest win. Virginia Tech barely made a bowl game. They finished at 6-6. These are not super impressive wins. These are not wins that you go out there and you say, "Hi, I am Clemson, and I beat Virginia Tech." No. But they found their way into the conference championship game, and now they have a 1-game playoff. They have a 1-game shot to win the ACC and get a seed in the college football playoff. Now, if they do, they're going to be the 12th seed. There's no doubt in my mind about that. Honestly, I don't think they really even deserve a shot, but that's how it goes. That's how it's supposed to be done, and I don't mind it. I think it's cool that this team gets a shot, but they don't really get a chance. I don't think they really stand a chance against an SMU squad. We will see what happens. But Clemson is the number 2 winner of the week. And at number 1, the biggest winner this week is just old school rivalries. We had gotten to a point in college football where, yes, there were some bad blood between Ohio State and Michigan in the game. There was the bad blood in the Iron Bowl between Auburn and Alabama. But these other rivalries seemingly had lost their luster. But what we saw this week in college football showed that there are still rivalries live and well in college football. We saw not 1, not 2, not 3, but 4 teams plant their flag, plant their spear at midfield after the game. Led to 4 fights, led to 4 brawls, and led to a whole argument. Should they be allowed to do it or not? My take: let them do it. Doesn't really matter. But it just shows me that the sport of college football is not going anywhere. It's been a very tumultuous road this season, really, in college football. It's been a new era, really. This is the beginning of a new era in college football, and it's very important that if you want to keep those traditions alive, you continue it with all of the changes the sport is going through. Not just the expanded playoffs, not just the expanded conferences, not just the NIL, but just all of it happening at once, really. It can change the sport. It can kill the sport, and that's something I was very concerned about at the beginning of the season. What this week showed me, what this rivalry week showed me, is that this sport is alive and well, and it does not matter which direction it heads in. It will continue to be the college football that we know and love as the years go on. Rivalries win the week. Huge performances, huge games, huge upsets. We love to see it. We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, not only did we go over our top 5 winners, but there's also an opposite side of the coin. Who had the worst week? Who had the top 5 hardest weeks on all of college football? We'll talk about that coming up next here on Sports by GSMC Podcast Network.
Looking for your daily fix of sports talk without having to pay for it? GSMC Sports Network is available on YouTube. Just search GSMC Sports Network. Get your fix of daily sports talk shows on YouTube. Absolutely free. NFL, college football, NBA, MLB, MMA, UFC, fantasy football, and so much more. GSMC Sports Network has shows running all day long, with new sports shows starting every 2 hours. Just like on your favorite cable sports channel, except GSMC Sports Network is absolutely free. Just search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube to catch one of your new favorite shows, like the GSMC College Football Podcast, Chip Shot Football Podcast, Hoops and Heels Women's Sports Podcast, GSMC Basketball Podcast, and so many more. Check it out for yourself. GSMC Sports Network, now available on YouTube absolutely free. Search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube right now.
Welcome back to Sports by GSMC Podcast Network. I am your host, Jeremy Lapidus. Today is Monday, December 2nd. If you were just tuning in, we just finished going over the top 5 winners from last week in college football. On the other side of the coin, in this segment, we turn our attention to the biggest losers, the top 5 biggest losers this week in college football. But before we do that, remember, if you would like to be an even bigger part of the show than you already are, all you need to do is go to gsmcpodcast.net. Or if you are on YouTube, you can use that super chat feature. If you do either of those two things, a message should pop up on the bottom of the screen for you, me, and everybody else around the world to see. If you do have a burning question about sports, anything at all that you would like to ask, go and throw that in the comments. Throw it in the chat. I will get to it as soon as I possibly can. I appreciate everybody so much for sticking around, talking some sports with me here on a beautiful Monday, December 2nd. But like I was saying, in this segment, we turn our attention to the losers of the week. We just went over the winners, and you can't have winners without losers. And in sports, there's no bigger disparity there. But at number 5, the 5th biggest loser of the week, we're going to go all the way back to Friday night when the Georgia Tech Bulldogs Georgia Tech took on the Georgia Bulldogs. And we had some overtime, 8 overtimes to be exact. Overtime rules here came into question, and it kind of got quieted by the chaos that was this weekend and the whole flag planting issues. But the overtime rules here still shine big. This is something that has been heavily debated, not just across the college football sphere, but just the football sphere as a whole. What's the best way to do overtimes? There were plenty of issues with it, and I don't think anybody was really happy with it in the end. The biggest issue that I had with it, and the biggest issue that I saw a lot of other people with it, was the fact that they just kept walking back and forth, which I understand. You get to choose, hey, you want to play in front of the band, it makes it harder for the away team, you want to make sure it's even. But the bigger issue is the timeouts, right? The fact that they get a whole new timeout every single overtime. You saw the way that Kirby Smart was taking advantage of that, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. I'm not mad at Kirby Smart for doing that. He did his job. He had his timeouts. He did what he needed to do. But I think there needs to be some kind of rule. Maybe, and I'm not here to figure that out. I don't really know what it would be. I don't mind the dueling 2-point conversions, honestly. It's not something I hate. I love that there's no way to tie in college football. It's one of my biggest issues with the NFL, is the fact that there is a tie at the end of it. And we almost saw one earlier between the Panthers and the Tampa Bay Buccaneers after they went back and forth on possessions. But this is a issue with the overtime rules. There's a way to fix it. I think they should just continue to do what they do for the first 2 overtimes. Just go back and forth. There's no reason to just, make them get rid of the actual football part of football. I like that it goes forever, though. It's something I do like about it. But let me know, how would you fix the OT rules? That's my number 5 loser of the week. Number 4, the 4th biggest loser, and a team that got themselves eliminated with a real shot to make some noise and make some chaos continue to stir up in the college football world. It's Texas A&M. They went out there in the biggest game of their season, a rivalry that was renewed after over 10 years of being dormant between them and Texas. The in-state rivalry there, and Texas and game day came down for it, right? It was in their house. It was loud. Everyone was excited. The offense put up a fat goose egg, a 0. Absolutely nothing on the scoreboard from the offense. The defense had a pick 6. The defense played great. That's been kind of the way to describe Texas A&M all season long, really. The offense has been inconsistent. The defense has been great. They did their job against a Texas team that's very high-powered, a good Texas squad, but Texas A&M has eliminated themselves from college football playoff. They had a chance to win out and make the playoffs and really, really bring out the chaos in a season that already has been one of, if not the most chaotic seasons in the history of college football. They failed to do that. They're on the loser side of it. They're at number 4. Our number 3 loser of the week, we take a step back, go to the group of 5 on Thursday night. How about Tulane? The Green Wave lose. They had a top tier ticket, a real shot of making the college football playoff ahead of one of the group of 5 teams, ahead of one of the Power 5 teams, right? We had conversations about it. I didn't have it happening, but if Arizona State had lost, if Iowa State had lost, neither of those ended up happening, but if they had won, first of all, that was the biggest checklist. They had a real argument to get in as that 5th conference. They were crawling their way up the rankings. They were one spot behind the highest ranked Big 12 team. Now they're not going to make it. And it sucks. I was ready for that to happen. I was ready to see the chaos that would ensue in the Big 12 if the American Conference has gotten it ahead of them. Do I really think it was going to happen? No. But now we know for sure it's not going to happen. Tulane had a golden opportunity to make chaos reign in college football. And with the way the season has gone, I was ready for it. I was prepared. I had my hatches buttoned down. But for now, Tulane, the 3rd biggest loser of the week. Our 2nd biggest loser, it's Miami. We talked a lot about it earlier on in the show. They just can't get it done. That defense is just not good. That's the reason they're not going to make the college football playoff. You talk about a team that got themselves eliminated. It's Miami, in my opinion. Now, I know they could still find a way in as like the 11-ish seed if the committee still believes in them. I think they're out, and I think they need a little bit of help to get in. I think the ACC has just lost one of their bids to the playoff, and now we take a look at where we sit in college football. Miami on the outside looking in, we're looking at probably another Alabama slipping into the playoffs at the last second, if I'm being honest with you. Not a fun time, not what I wanted to see, not what I think most people in the country wanted to see. It's probably going to happen, though. I don't think Alabama deserves to get in, but Miami, with that defense, they probably did not deserve to get in. Anthony asks, do you think it's a scheme Miami's running or the players? I don't want to say it's the players necessarily, but it's not really the scheme either. Right? It's probably a mix of both, if I'm being honest, right? Syracuse's offense is no slouch. Don't get me wrong. Syracuse has an offense that has consistently gotten them out of jams because Syracuse and Miami are the same team. They are the exact same team, just Miami has a more consistent offense. They were too reliant on Cam Ward, and he kind of just ran out of gas there at the end. He had a great game. He really did. I'm going to blame the scheme. I'm going to blame the players a little bit more than the scheme because I don't think they're really running anything too complicated. You take a look at what they're doing. They're just not executing at the level that you need to execute. It's a little bit of both, though. It really is. Miami's defense just was not good enough, and it came back to bite them multiple times down the stretch of the season against Georgia Tech and now against Syracuse. But at number one, who else would it be other than Ohio State and Ryan Day? They are the biggest losers of the week. The 4th straight time that they have now lost to Michigan. And this is different than any of the other losses. The other ones, this is a Michigan team that's undefeated heading into it. This is a Michigan team that's trying to make the conference championship game. This is a Michigan team that's competing for the playoffs, for the national title. But not this one. This year's Michigan team was 5-6 heading into the game. This year's Michigan team was probably not going to make a bowl game. This year's Michigan team did not have a quarterback. This year's Michigan team was not the answer. This is just... There's not a lot of words to describe it, really, for Ohio State. It's incredibly disappointing. This is a fireable offense, honestly. He just cannot get up. Ryan Day cannot find a way to game plan against Michigan. They just needed to take advantage of their bad secondary, and they did not do that. They instead tried to run the ball, a place where Ohio State's been weak all season, the offensive line, against the one strength that Michigan had, the defensive line. They go out there, it's just not it. Anthony said a lot of Miami fans, which I am a part of, are saying that when your scheme relies on one position, it's a bad sign. You might not be a good coordinator. I don't think it's a good idea either to rely on one person. But honestly, there's a lot of schemes that work like that because his scheme relies so much on the star position that it seems like it's either he can't coach to the players or it's over reliant on the star position. I think you're right. Actually, I think it is over reliant. I think that's what it is. It's over reliant on the star position. There's plenty of college defenses and professional defenses that work like that. I know the star is something that's making its way up there, and it's not like they don't have guys in that Miami defense. They wouldn't be up there. They have defense. The defense can make plays, but it is definitely a little bit of both. Like I said, the players. You are right. They don't have the players to make the scheme work, and the scheme isn't good enough for the players. They're not adjusting. It's just not a good defense. Whatever the actual reason is, I think that honestly is a really good diagnosis of it, Anthony. But whatever it is, it's just not working over there in Miami. And I wanted Miami to make the playoffs, honestly. I thought they were a fun team. I love watching Cam Ward play. Miami has not been that same Miami in a very long time, and I was looking forward to getting that Miami in these high-leverage situations, but it just doesn't live up to it. But those are our top 5 losers of the week. We're going to take a quick break here. When we come back, we turn our attention to the NFL. Monday Night Football currently underway. I promise you I'm not cheating. I have my preview for that. We'll talk about what I expect to happen as well as some updates as we currently stand. The Broncos are ahead of the Browns. Oh, never mind. Tie game, 7-7, 1 minute to go in the first. We're going to talk about that game, how it's going right now, and what I expect down the stretch here. We'll be right back here on Sports by GSMC Podcast Network.
For the best and latest podcasts available anywhere, go to the podcast app on your cell phone and type in GSMC to access free content-rich podcasts on health and wellness, book reviews, sports, entertainment, relationships, social media, movies, technology, finance, and even weird news. Subscribe and download the GSMC Podcast Network's family of shows, available everywhere podcasts are found.
Welcome back to Sports by GSMC Podcast Network. I'm your host, Jeremy Lapidus. Today is Monday, December 2nd. If you are just tuning in, we just finished going over the winners and losers from a wild rivalry week in college football. In this segment, we turn our attention to the NFL. Just about done with quarter 1 in Monday Night Football. Game is tied at 7. Basically a whole new ball game. We're going to talk a little bit about what I think there in a second, but before we do, remember, if you would like to be an even bigger part of the show than you already are, all you need to do is go to gsmcpodcast.net. Or if you are on YouTube, you can use that super chat feature. If you do either of those two things, a message should pop up on the bottom of the screen for you, me, and everybody else around the world to see. If you do have a burning question about sports, anything at all that you want to ask, go throw that in the comments. Throw it in the chat. I'll get to it as soon as I can. For instance, finishing up a little bit of a conversation from our last segment, Anthony says Ohio State is a little bit overrated. He thinks the issue is their defense and they get beat up by Oregon or Georgia in the playoffs. To that point, we already saw what happens against Oregon. They played them tight. They lost by 1 point. I don't think they really get beat up in that one. But I do get what you're saying. The defense isn't the greatest. I think their biggest weakness is the offensive line. I think it's an incredibly talented team, arguably the most talented team in college football. He also says Miami has to rely on SMU winning the ACC championship to get into the playoffs. I don't know if there's really anything they can do to get in. Again, if SMU wins, that's a better shot for them to get in than if Clemson wins. If Clemson wins, they're absolutely out. There's no chance. There's no chance at all. But outside of that, there's not really another opportunity for them to get in. They can't show, and it's going to depend tomorrow when we see where the college football playoff has them. I have them on the outside looking in. If you're done playing football and you are not currently inside, there's not really a big chance for you to get in. I understand what you're saying. I do see the argument for Miami to still be on that fringe spot, and if everything goes the way it's supposed to, and they're on that fringe on the inside, not on the outside, they have a shot, but I personally would put them just outside the bubble. They're the second team out for me. So because of that, I don't think they really have a big chance to get in, but not that far off. So maybe if chaos ensues, they can find a way in. But in this segment, we're going to turn our attention to the NFL. Right, we've talked a lot of college football here today. I think it's about time we talk a little bit about Monday Night Football. Currently going on, one quarter just about in the books. There's 50 seconds left in it as the Broncos have just punted it back to the Browns, currently tied at 7. We're going to do a little bit of analysis here based on what I had in the pregame, right? This is a really, really fun matchup, honestly. It doesn't sound that great on paper, but you get a Broncos team coming in at 7-5, trying to find a way into the playoffs, and the Browns, who probably thought they would be switched with the Broncos right now, just playing Jameis Winston football, right? Jameis Winston football is maybe the best kind of football. They go out there, this is a game where after winning against a Pittsburgh team that just dropped 44, not something I really expected them to even be able to do, regardless of the defense they played. Cleveland now has a chance to back that up and win 2 straight for the first time this season. They get a Denver team that has been hot, to say the least. This is a Denver team that Bo Nix was getting some Rookie of the Year conversations. Anthony asks if I'm surprised the Broncos are this good with a rookie quarterback. Absolutely. It's not the fact that it's a rookie. I'm shocked that Bo Nix is good at football, if I'm being honest with you. I was very low on Bo Nix coming into the season. I was very low on Bo Nix about 4 games into the season, but they keep winning games. And really, I kind of have to drop my guard. Do I think he has a chance of winning Rookie of the Year? Absolutely not. He should not be in that conversation. It's a 2-man race between Jaden Daniels, who's probably going to win, especially after what he did this week, and Brock Bowers, who is going to break rookie records. Not just rookie tight end records. He's already broken all of those, but rookie receiving records. It's the same ones that Puka Nacua broke at the end of last season. He's going to be a star in the league, and I think there should be some real thought behind a Brock Bowers Offensive Rookie of the Year. But on to the game tonight. You have a Broncos defense, and you have both of these teams that kind of are built with the same mindset, right? Run first, play good defense. Now, it's worked well for one team, has not worked that well for the other. Obviously, you see in their records which team it's working for, right? The Broncos have come out there, and their defense, their kind of starless defense outside of Pat Surtain, have been incredible. The pressure they've been able to generate. This is a Broncos team that just is feasting on teams like the Browns. But this also kind of feels like a trap game for the Denver Broncos. Again, they've come in hot. They've been winning lots of games over their last couple of weeks, and they've been dominating, really. Outside of a game that they probably should have won against the Chiefs, they have not lost since they played the Chargers all the way back in week 6 of the season, right? This is a team that over the last 5 games has only lost 1 game so far. So this is a very, very hot Broncos team. Bo Nix continues to play better and better. But this is a Cleveland team that when you have Jameis Winston, they can just explode for 50 points on any given night, right? And we saw that to a certain extent. He's been playing better football. He hasn't really been turning the ball over that much, and I think that's going to be the key. Anthony says when Bo Nix was drafted to the Broncos, it's a perfect fit type of quarterback that Sean Payton wanted. That's what he was saying, and you're right. It has worked that way. He also says that it hurts Cleveland. That's what hurts Cleveland. They don't have a reliable quarterback, and they're one-dimensional. Yeah, you're absolutely right about that. I think Nick Chubb is due to have a big game. I know he had 2 touchdowns the other day, but I think he's due to kind of have a big game. It's a good Broncos defense. It's not the biggest one. It's not the best opportunity for him to really go off. But this is a Browns team that I understand. You probably should not be on this Browns team. Denver favored by 5.5 at this one before it opened. But this is a team that in Cleveland that just kind of sticks around. Even in games that they're losing, they just kind of find a way to stick around, especially with Jameis Winston at the helm. I'm not a Jameis Winston truther or anything, right? I don't think he's going to be the quarterback of the future, and you're right, they don't have a reliable quarterback. But when we take a look at this roster, when we take a look at how they've been playing, they just have not been playing up to their potential. Myles Garrett had a huge game last week. I'd look for him to have another big game. I know it's a solid offensive line for the Denver Broncos, but I think this is about time that Jameis Winston has a true Jameis Winston game. And I think that's going to push the Browns over the limit. My final score prediction for this game, the Cleveland Browns 27, the Denver Broncos 20. So, as we stand right now, second quarter just began, tied at 7 right now. The Browns are about to start a drive. Anthony says he doesn't think the game's going to be covered. I think it's going to be by 1 to 4 points, but sounds like you're on the Broncos, yeah? I understand. Again, this is a Broncos team that probably on paper and the way that they're playing game should be the better team. But it's been a long time since they really lost a game, and I feel like the wheels are bound to fall off soon, especially when you're a Broncos team that might be overlooking the Browns. This is a Broncos team that, coming up on their schedule, they have a lot of big games, right? They still have the Chiefs, they still have the Chargers, they still have the Bengals, and they have the Colts coming up too, a game that's always fun whenever the Broncos and Colts play each other. This just might not be the biggest of their concerns. They might look past this one, and I think that's a mistake, especially with how tight that wild card race is in the AFC. And I just don't feel like this is a game where the Broncos are destined to win. We'll see what happens, though. Like I said, I think the Browns come out with a huge win. They win their second straight, kind of keep their hopes alive. But let me know what you think. I'd love to hear your thoughts. We're going to take a quick break here. When we come back, we're going to talk a little bit about the Bears. I know it's overdue. We didn't have a show on Friday. So we're going to talk about Matt Eberflus, his future in the NFL, and why he's no longer coaching anymore. So stick around for that. We'll be right back here on Sports by GSMC Podcast Network. Welcome back to Sports by GSMC Podcast Network. I'm your host, Jeremy Lapidus. Today is Monday, December 2nd. If you were just tuning in, we just went over the Monday Night Football game, currently tied at 7. The Broncos have just gotten the ball back. In this segment, we go back a couple days. We go back to last week, even on Thanksgiving, on the Friday after Thanksgiving, Black Friday, if you will. Matt Eberflus, former coach of the Chicago Bears, is no longer employed. We'll talk about what that means for him, what that means for the team, and what that means for for Caleb Williams' future, really. But before we get into that, remember, if you would like to be an even bigger part of the show than you already are, all you need to do is go to gsmcpodcast.net. Or if you are on YouTube, you can use that super chat feature. If you do either of those two things, message should pop up on the bottom of the screen for you, me, and anybody else around the world to see. If you do have a burning question about sports, anything at all that you would like to ask, go and throw that in the comments. Throw it in the chat. I will get to it as soon as I possibly can. For instance, Anthony brings up, honestly, a really good point and something that probably deserves its own segment later on when we get a little bit slower, maybe towards the spring. But he says he hopes the NFL could have a minor league system, like the UFL, the combination of the XFL and the USFL is trying to do. I think that honestly is a really good idea. And that's, I think, what the UFL, like I said, is trying to propose. It's just a question of whether or not the NFL is willing to work with a league like that. I think proof of concept, we've seen spring football kind of struggle a little bit. I'd like to see it have a couple of successful seasons, and obviously having NFL backing would absolutely help. but I think the NFL is waiting. We've seen some infusion of talent from the XFL, the second round, the USFL. Some really talented guys come in from those leagues, play huge roles, right, in some big games in the NFL. So they're obviously producing players at a rate that's probably worth doing, but I don't know how or if it's going to happen. I hope it does, because that's something that I really love. I love the idea of a spring football league. We'll cover that a little bit more, like I said, when we get to the spring, near the end of the NFL season, when these spring football leagues start up again. But that is an excellent point, Anthony. That is something we will talk about later on more in depth in the future. But we're going to stick to the NFL for now. Matt Eberflus, former coach of the Chicago Bears, packed his bags after Thanksgiving. This is the second year in a row we've had a coach fired right after Thanksgiving, and this is one that has been long overdue, right? The Bears were 4-2 at one point. Now they are 4-8, have lost 6 straight games, and I think they have found the most brutal way to lose a game every single time. Obviously, this starts on the Hail Mary thrown by Jaden Daniels, complete in the end zone after some taunting of fans that Tyreek Stevenson was doing. He gets benched for that. Then DJ Moore walks off the field, and it seems like they've lost the locker room in that next week against the Cardinals, where they put up 9 points and get absolutely destroyed. Then in the Patriots game, that one's just a normal game. They get destroyed. The defense continues to play great. That's kind of been the theme, holding teams basically to 20 points or less. And then the Vikings in overtime the next week. They complete an onside kick. They tie up the game. Caleb Williams gives them a chance. And then they just can't hold in overtime. They lose to the Minnesota Vikings. And then maybe the worst offense, the one that you can really only blame the coaching staff for. Thanksgiving Day. The Lions come out strong. They destroy the Bears. The Bears are held to 2 first downs in the entirety of the first half. The Bears go out there in the second half, and they start to turn it around a little bit. They start to make the moves that you would expect a team that, wants to win a game to make, right? They come all the way back. They are down 3 points in field goal range with about 40 seconds to go. Caleb Williams takes a sack. They've got 1 timeout. 32 seconds on the clock here. You all know the picture here, right? 32 seconds, and honestly, I like the idea of not calling the timeout there. I really do. I support the idea of, with 30 seconds, 3rd and long, not calling a timeout. You want to save that so your kicker can get on the field. With 30 seconds, you should have had 2 play calls in the huddle beforehand so that you could hurry up in case of something, because that clearly was the game plan. Hey, we're going to do 1 play, and then we're going to line up and go again. That is the mistake there. I don't think the mistake originally is not calling the timeout. Now, as time continues to tick, as Caleb Williams clearly does not have the play, as they are not set, that is when a timeout needs to be called, either by Caleb or by the coaching staff, right? Caleb's a rookie quarterback. I'm not going to put too much on him. He's probably told, hey, just listen to the coaching staff in that situation. But Matt Eberflus absolutely should have called a timeout once 10, 11, 12 seconds ticked off the clock, and you were down to 20 seconds, and they were still not sure what to do. That's when you call a timeout. You leave 20 seconds on the clock, get a quick play over the middle. You still have the whole field. You can still get a spike down if you have 20-ish seconds on the clock, right? 5-6 seconds for a play. Then you have 10 seconds to line up and spike the ball, right? I understand, or in that case, run the field goal unit on. I understand the issue. I don't hate not calling the timeout originally. And that's been the one thing that I haven't seen brought up. Now, obviously, the timeout does need to be called before that ball is snapped, before 30 seconds go off the clock. That was a mistake. But originally, I don't mind the idea. The biggest issue is they need to have 2 plays called in that huddle before they break for that second down play. Caleb can't take that sack, but they were still ready and in field goal range there for a potential kick. Obviously, he gets fired for this. He says, I didn't do anything wrong. He's done something wrong. He's no longer in charge of the Bears. He will be a good defensive coordinator somewhere. That Bears defense was really good, right? That Bears defense was in the top of the league for a lot of the year. for almost for most of the measurements that you look at, right? This was a really solid Bears team that, especially in the first half of the season, seemed to be clicking on all cylinders. Caleb Williams is not the issue. You can talk about Caleb Williams and what he has and has not been, but he has not been the biggest issue. The biggest issue has been the coaching staff, and I hope the Bears find a competent one. There's been plenty of names out there. Ben Johnson has been put out a couple times from the Lions, Aaron Glenn from the Lions. There's a couple of big names. They just need to get the coach right. They really do. I think this is a team with a lot of hope, a lot of chance for the future, honestly, as we take a look at where they stand. Not sure if that's how it's going to go because the coaching staff really does make a huge difference. But Matt Eberflus is gone. I've been calling for his head for a while. I did not think he was going to survive after 2 weeks ago. They fired the offensive coordinator instead, and this is the right decision. It's time to move on as an organization. He probably should have been fired after last season, if I'm being honest. But to each their own. The Bears like to do their things. The Bears like to do it how they like to do it. And we'll see how it works. But Matt Eberflus gone. We'll see who they bring in. Thomas Brown is the interim coach. He was promoted to interim offensive coordinator after they fired Shane Waldron. Now he's the interim head coach. Pretty big ups for him. Big for the Bears. We'll see what happens, though. Let me know what you think. Who should the Bears hire in the offseason? What do you think of this firing? I'm pretty sure unanimously the right decision. But let me know what you think. And thank you, everybody, so much for tuning in to today's episode of Sports by GSMC Podcast Network. I have been your host, Jeremy Lapidus. We will be back same time, same place tomorrow, discussing all things NFL. Power rankings come out tomorrow. We'll talk about everything that happened this week, winners and losers, and much more. I'll see you then. You all have a good one. Bye-bye.
Let's go. I wake up to a little bit of drool on my pillow, feel like it's gonna be a bad day. Yeah, I'm tired of shit, and the coffee ain't hit.